Hello and welcome to this walkthrough of the FSX commercial check ride. We're on the runway at Bremerton and we're just waiting to hear the soothing voice of everyone's favourite flight instructor, Rod Machado's wife.
Okay, I see you're ready to demonstrate your commercial piloting skill and obtain that flight simulator commercial license.
Ah, she's lovely,
Since you
isn't
already
she?
read a
But while
briefing
she's
in the
talking
commercial
away,
check
we
ride,
can make a few
you know
sneaky
what's in store
changes
for you.
before we take off.
So we'll begin our
We're going to
flight by
cheat a
making
little bit on
short
this
field
test and
takeoff,
use the
climbing to
autopilot wherever
800
we
feet,
can.
then
So let's set the
configuring
altitude
airplane
now
for
to
a normal cruise
5,500
climb at
feet and the
120
vertical
knots.
speed to 700 feet per
After
minute.
takeoff,
We
climb
won't
to
actually engage the
5,500
autopilot
feet,
yet,
turn right
but it'll
to a
give us
heading
one
of
less thing to worry
030
about later on when we're making our
Okay,
initial
take
climb.
off as soon as you are ready.
Another thing we can do right now is to hit Shift Z to bring up the heads-up display at the top of the screen. This will make it easier to monitor our exact speed during the flight. And Shift 4 will bring up the power control display, which is useful as it shows us whether the engine's cowl flaps are open or closed. Now she won't actually fail you for not setting the cowls correctly, but if you want it to be true to life then you should learn how to do it properly, which is open for a climb and closed at all other times. Right, we're good to go, so set the power to max and hit the period key to get rolling. She's looking for us to pull back at about 80 knots and then climb at a speed of 105. We can raise the gear as soon as we're airborne and then pitch the plane at about 15 degrees to maintain a speed of 105 until the next message appears at the top of the screen. Okay, now here's the tricky bit. We've got 15 seconds to set the manifold pressure to exactly 22 inches and the RPM to 2300, and 45 seconds to reach a steady speed of 120 knots. So let's hit the autopilot to take care of the flying and concentrate on getting those power settings right first. Now the gauges can be a bit hard to read, but if you hover over them with your mouse it should pop up with the exact readings. Now it's that last bit that seems to trip a lot of people up, because in the lessons we've been taught to climb at 25 inches and 2500 RPM, but for this initial climb it's definitely looking for 22 inches and 2300 RPM. The most important thing here is to keep on adjusting that manifold pressure to keep it at a steady 22 inches for the whole climb. We also need to maintain a steady speed of 120 knots for the whole climb, but we can keep the speed constant by adjusting the vertical speed setting on the autopilot.
For this examination, you have permission to fly through the Class B airspace at SeaTac Airport. You need not talk to ATC on this flight. All I want you to do is fly the airplane.
Okay, she wants us to turn right to a heading of 030. Now we could just hit the heading button on the autopilot, because whenever she asks us to change heading, she'll also adjust the heading button for us. But it's always best to start the turn manually, because the autopilot can sometimes bank you in the wrong direction. So let's bank to the right, then we can get the autopilot to take over when we're about a quarter of the way there. Right, now we just need to keep an eye on the manifold pressure and the speed during the turn and the climb. I'll skip forward a bit now to when we reach 5,500 feet.
When you reach a cruise altitude of 5,500 feet, I want you to fly at a power setting of 22 inches of manifold pressure and 2300 RPM, and configure the airplane for normal cruise flight.
Now we're already at 22 inches and 2300 RPM, and the autopilot's looking after our heading and altitude, so we haven't actually got much to do here. We just need to remember to close the cowl flaps once we're level at 5,500. Now, even though she says she's looking for a speed of 170 knots, she's actually looking for 160. She's going to give us a full minute and a half to reach that speed. She'll then ask us to demonstrate a gear down descent. So just let the plane gradually speed up on its own to 160. I'll skip forward to that point now.
Okay, now I'd like you to demonstrate a gear down descent to 3,500 feet.
Okay, now we've got 20 seconds to get the manifold pressure down to exactly 15 inches. So again, hover the mouse pointer over the gauge to set it precisely. We've also got 30 seconds to get the gear down, but we need to let the speed drop lower than 152 knots before we lower it. Okay, now we can set the autopilot to take us down to 3,500 feet. Now, as long as we keep the speed below 152 knots, we can afford a pretty steep descent, so set the vertical speed to minus 1,000 feet per minute. And again, we just need to keep on adjusting the manifold pressure to keep it at a steady 15 inches all the way down to 3,500 feet. Let's skip forward to that point now.
I want you to level the airplane out at 3,500 feet with the gear extended and fly at a speed of 140 knots.
Wait for the plane to level out at 3,500, then slowly raise the manifold pressure back up to 22 inches and get ready to bank left.
Now, I want you to make a left turn to a heading of 210 degrees.
Again, start the turn manually, then hit the heading button on the autopilot and let it take you round to 210 degrees, ready for a gear up climb to 6,500 feet. We'll skip forward to that point now.
Let's raise the gear and begin a normal climb to and level out at 6,500 feet.
Okay, this next bit's quite tricky, but we can use the autopilot to help us, so hit pause to set it up. Set the altitude to 6,500 feet and the vertical speed to 1,400 feet per minute. Okay, let's unpause and immediately raise the gear and open the cowl flaps. Now I've got 20 seconds to set the power to 25 inches and 2,500 RPM and 45 seconds to reach a steady speed of 120 knots. So we can hover the mouse over the gauges, set the power precisely, and then let the autopilot take us up to 6,500 feet. Now the plane can't maintain 25 inches all the way up to 6,500 feet, but we need to do so for as long as we can. We can also make adjustments to the vertical speed on the autopilot to help maintain a steady airspeed of 120 knots for the climb. Once we level out at 6,500 feet, she's going to ask us to activate the GPS and plot a course for Harvey Field Airport. But we're not actually going to have time to do that yet, because she's also going to ask us to demonstrate another gear down descent to 3,500 feet at the same time. So let's concentrate on that first. She'll move the heading bug towards Harvey Field for us, so we'll just let the autopilot bank the plane to the left for now, while we get the power down to the cruise settings of 22 inches and 2,300 RPM.
When your airplane is configured for cruise flight and trimmed, I want you to activate the GPS and proceed direct to Harvey Field, identifier S43. Okay, now I'd like you to demonstrate a gear down descent to 3,500 feet.
Okay, it's the same procedure as before for the last gear down descent. So we need to drop the manifold pressure to exactly 15 inches and lower the gear when we get below 152 knots. Now we can use the autopilot to take us down to 3,500 feet, so set the altitude to 3,500 and the vertical speed to minus 1,000 or minus 1,100 feet per minute. Close the cowl flaps for the descent, and remember to keep on adjusting the manifold pressure to keep it at exactly 15 inches all the way down. Got a bit of time to set up the GPS on the way down, so we can hit shift 3 to activate it, but we also need to remember to keep checking our manifold pressure at the same time to keep it at 15 inches. We can move the GPS display up to the top left hand corner of the screen to get it out of the way, and to plot the course for Harvey Field, click on the FPL button on the GPS and dial in the ident code for Harvey Field, which is S43, then click enter.
I want you to level the airplane out at 3,500 feet with the gear extended and fly at a speed of 140 knots.
Once we level out at 3,500 feet, we can gradually raise the manifold pressure up to about 20 inches. She's then going to ask us to begin a high-speed descent to 1,500 feet.
Since you'll be landing at Harvey Field, I want you to begin a high-speed descent when you're 15 miles from Harvey Field. During the descent, do not let your power increase to more than 22 inches of manifold pressure, nor do I want you to exceed an airspeed of 200 knots. Your objective is to descend to 1,500 feet, which is approximately 500 feet above the traffic pattern altitude at Harvey Field.
Okay, we can set the plane up for a high-speed descent now, so first off, let's raise the gear. Now let's set up the autopilot for the descent. Set the altitude to 1,500 and the vertical speed to minus 1,000. With the gear raised, the plane will pick up quite a bit of speed, but as long as we stay below 200 knots, with a manifold pressure setting below 22 inches, we'll be fine.